Hello and welcome to the Comparability Report training video. My name is Erin Suddeth and I'm the branch manager for the Title I Part A Support and Improvement branch at the Kentucky Department of Education. This video will walk you through the required completion of the Title I Comparability Report. Our agenda for today includes an overview of comparability, important definitions, materials needed to complete the report, information on how to group your data, and finally a walkthrough of completing the report. Title I contains 3 fiscal tests: supplement not supplant, comparability, and maintenance of effort. Each test is designed to ensure that federal funds are used in ways that provide extra services to children who are at greatest risk of failing to reach state academic achievement standards. Comparability is required by Section 1118C of the Every Student Succeeds Act. A district is permitted to receive federal Title I funds only if state and local funds support services in Title I schools that are at least comparable to services in non-Title I schools. Comparability is determined through an annual school-level calculation conducted at the beginning of the school year. Comparability reports must be submitted to KDE by the November deadline each year. You need to be familiar with the following definitions in order to complete the report. Title I school: any public school that is served with Title I funds. This applies to schools operating school-wide programs as well as those operating targeted assistance programs. Non-Title I school: any public school that is not served with Title I funds. Grade spans: a grouping of grade levels which constitute the level of students a school serves. For example, a 6 to 8 school serves grades 6, 7, and 8. FTE stands for full-time equivalency and refers to the percentage of time an employee is paid from a particular funding source. An employee paid 100% with state and local funds would have an FTE of 1.0. An employee paid 50% with state and local funds would have an FTE of 0.5. Small school versus large school. For comparability purposes, a large school is generally considered a school with an enrollment nearly double that of the other schools in that grade span. That means a small school is one that is nearly half the enrollment of other schools within that grade span. For example, if a high school has an enrollment of 1,500 students and another high school has an enrollment of 800 students, the school with 800 students would be considered small in comparison to the school with 1,500 students. You'll need the following materials in order to complete the comparability report: access to GMAP, the KDE Comparability Excel workbook, and I'll show you where to find that in a moment, the following data for all A1 schools in the district: enrollment data for a single day that school was in session between the last day of the second month of school, a school month being at least 20 teaching days, and October 31st of the current school year. Typically, this means September 30th through October 31st inclusive, but may vary slightly dependent on the district's calendar. Poverty data. This data must be taken the same day as enrollment data. The enrollment and poverty data can be accessed through each school's enrollment summary report in Infinite Campus. The report can be accessed via the pathway Student Information Reports. Be sure to save the reports used to complete the comparability report. If your district is selected for monitoring, KDE consultants will review these reports to ensure the data matches the comparability report. The school's Title I status, either Title I or non-Title I, this can be found in GMAP. And finally, counts of all state and locally funded staff at each A1 school. This refers to anyone that provides or supervises instruction to students, including teachers, principals, librarians, guidance personnel, curriculum coaches, and paraeducators. Administrative assistants, clerical personnel, bookkeepers, and cafeteria workers are not included in these counts. Contact your KDE consultant with questions regarding any staff members you have who were not mentioned in the list. This is very important. Staff members paid with federal funds must be excluded from comparability. And we're talking about all federal funds, not just Title I Part A. For example, let's say a school has a teacher paid 75% from state and local funds and 25% from a federal funding source, such as Title I Part A. On the comparability report, that teacher would be documented as 0.75 because that's the portion of their position paid from a non-federal funding source. You may wish to have our comparability report guide on hand while completing the comparability report. The guide is available on our Title I Part A Documents and Resources page and contains a lot of helpful information about completing the report, including step-by-step instructions, as well as screenshots. Let's take a look at the data we will be using to complete our sample comparability report. As you can see, we have 7 schools, 4 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school. We need to group these schools based on data in order to complete the report. In order to compare the schools, we group first based on grade span and then by enrollment. First, we'll group by grade level. Group A contains grades K through 6. You'll notice that there are 3 schools that are K through 5 and 1 school that's K through 6. We include the K through 6 school in this grouping because it shares the most grades in common with the K through 5 schools. It shares 6 grade levels with the K through 5 schools and only 1 grade level with 6 through 8 schools. Group B includes grades 6 through 9. Again, Garfield Middle serves grades 6 through 9 and has more grades in common with Jefferson Middle, which serves grades 6 through 8, so we group them together. Group C includes grades 9 through 12 and includes only 1 school. Next, we will group based on enrollment. Looking at the 4 schools in Group A, Washington Elementary has 440 students. This is comparable to Lincoln Elementary, which has 470 students. Those enrollment numbers are roughly half that of the 950 students at Roosevelt Elementary and the 1,010 students at Adams Elementary. Thinking back to the definition of small school versus large school, we can actually break Group A into 2 groups. Washington and Lincoln will be in Group A, small, while Roosevelt and Adams will be in Group A, large. Moving on to Group B, the enrollment numbers are fairly similar. Jefferson has 500 students and Garfield has 600 students. We don't need to break Group B down any further. And finally, Group C only has 1 school, so it will be its own group. Now that we have all our data and know how the schools will be grouped, we need the Comparability Excel worksheet. The worksheet is located in the GMAP District Document Library. Once you log into GMAP, select District Document Library from the main navigation menu. Select the current school year from the Root Folders menu, and then click Search Folders. You can either expand the subfolders by individually clicking on the plus signs or expand all the folders by clicking Expand All. Within the Title I Comparability Report folder, you'll click on Edit Documents. Looking at the document information table, we're going to click on the link next to the words Document Template to begin downloading the comparability report. Now, it's a large file and it may take a little longer to download and open, but there's no need to worry. This is also where you will upload your completed comparability report. To upload the report, click Upload Document, select the file, and complete the provided fields. Once the workbook is open, you need to click Enable Content at the top of the screen. The workbook is macro enabled and will not function correctly if the macros have been disabled. Of course, it's always a good idea to save the workbook before beginning. For consistency, KDE requests that you name the file as follows. The current school year, the district name, and the abbreviation CompRep. We appreciate you adhering to this naming convention as it makes it easier to identify which file belongs to each district. Go to the CR Worksheet tab to begin completing the report. As previously mentioned, it is a very large file, so it may take a minute for it to save. First, enter the name of the district, as well as the responsible official. The responsible official is the person who completed the report. Next, enter the date of the data used. Remember, this must be a date that schools were in session between roughly September 30th and October 31st of the current school year. The next section refers to schools with 100 or fewer students. These schools are excluded from comparability. The data we're using for the demonstration doesn't include schools with 100 or fewer students, so we'll leave this section blank. If you do have schools which meet these criteria, simply enter the school name in this section to exclude them from comparability. Next, we'll enter the number of schools we have in each grade span. Do not include preschool centers or alternative education programs unless they're being served with a Title I allocation. You might need to change some of the actual grade spans to reflect the grade spans in your district. Remember, in our sample district, we had K through 6, 6 through 9, and 9 through 12. So we'll go ahead and update the workbook accordingly. Please note that there are 8 different spaces here to accommodate a variety of grade spans. Each grade span section includes cells for Title I and non-Title I schools, as well as smaller schools and larger schools. Looking at grade span A, which is our K through 6 group, all 4 of the schools were Title I schools. Remember, we were also able to group the schools by enrollment numbers. We had 2 smaller schools and 2 larger schools. So I'll enter a 2 in grade span A, Title I schools, smaller, and a 2 in grade span A, Title I schools, larger. You may have noticed that each time I entered more than one school, created a new tab at the bottom of the page. The grade span A smaller tab is a comparison of our 2 smaller schools, and the grade span A larger tab is a comparison of our 2 larger schools. Let's move on to Group B. Remember, Group B had 2 middle schools with similar enrollment numbers. Since the schools are roughly the same size, we can place them in either the smaller or larger column. Let's choose the smaller column. Now, only one of the schools was a Title I school, so I'll enter a 1 in grade span B, smaller Title I school, and a 1 in the grade span B, smaller non-Title I school. Again, you can see that a new sheet has been generated for comparing the schools in grade span B. For the final grade span, we only had 1 school. Again, we can pick smaller or larger, so let's pick larger. The high school was a non-Title I school, so we'll enter a 1 in grade span C, non-Title I schools, larger. You'll notice that a new sheet was not generated for grade span C as there's only 1 school in the grade span, and therefore you can't compare it to anything. This is important to note for districts with only 1 school per grade span. If there's only 1 school in the grade span, no comparisons can be made. These districts must still complete the comparability report, however, they will complete the CR Worksheet tab only. So let's move on to the actual school comparisons. We'll begin on the grade span A smaller sheet. Typically, we compare Title I schools to non-Title I schools. However, both schools in this grade span are Title I schools, so we will be comparing high poverty versus low poverty. As you can see, there are 2 sections on this page. We have the Title I schools or high poverty schools at the top, and the comparison schools, which will include either non-Title I schools or low poverty Title I schools at the bottom. As a reminder, grade span A included Washington Elementary with a poverty percentage of 68% and Lincoln Elementary with a poverty percentage of 47%. There's no set percentage distinguishing high and low poverty, just as there's no set number differentiating small and large schools. Since Lincoln's percentage is lower than Washington's, Lincoln will be our low poverty school. Let's enter the information into the comparison school section using the data we reviewed earlier. Up to 1/2 of the lowest poverty schools may be used as comparison schools. So our comparison school is Lincoln Elementary. The grade span is K through 5. Enrollment is 470. This enrollment count should match the enrollment summary report from Infinite Campus and should not include preschool students. Kindergarten students who attend school for half the day should be counted as half-time students for enrollment purposes. And the instructional staff FTE is 22. Excel takes that data and calculates the average student-to-staff ratio as 21.36. So for every 21.36 students, there is one full-time equivalent instructional staff member. According to Section B of the Title I Fiscal Issues Non-Regulatory Guidance, when using the student-to-instructional staff ratio to determine comparability, a Title I school is considered comparable if its student-to-instructional staff ratio does not exceed 110% of the average ratio for non-Title I or low-poverty Title I schools. That means that this average student-to-instructional staff ratio needs to be multiplied by 110% to determine the comparability ratio. This calculation is also done automatically in Excel. So we can see that the comparability ratio is 23.5. This means that in order for the high poverty school to be comparable to this school, it must have a student-to-staff ratio of 23.5 or less. So now we'll scroll back to the Title I school section and enter the data for our high poverty Title I school. The school was Washington Elementary. The grade span was K through 5. The enrollment was 440 and the FTE was 20. Excel calculates the student-to-staff ratio for Washington Elementary as 22, meaning that for every 22 students, there's one FTE instructional staff member. Excel then compares this student-to-staff ratio to the comparability ratio of 23.5 and determines if the schools are comparable. The comparable column automatically populates with yes, since 22 is less than 23.5. These schools are comparable, which means that we're done with this sheet. So now we can move on to grade span A larger. Roosevelt Elementary will be our comparison school, since it has a poverty percentage of 45% compared to Adams Elementary's 75%. Roosevelt Elementary has a K through 5 grade span, an enrollment of 950, and an FTE of 44. Our average student-to-staff ratio is 21.59. Excel multiplies that by the required 110% and gives us a comparability ratio of 23.75. The high poverty school must have a student-to-staff ratio of 23.75 or less in order to be comparable. So let's enter the data for our high poverty school. Adams Elementary. We have a grade span of K through 6, an enrollment of 1,010, and an FTE of 42. The student-to-staff ratio is 24.05, which means that the schools are not comparable. If your schools aren't comparable, don't panic. The solution may be as simple as selecting a different day to pull enrollment and poverty data. Remember, you can select a day between roughly September 30th and October 31st of the current school year. A different day may yield different results. If you select a different day, you will need to update the date on the CR Worksheet tab, as well as the enrollment and poverty data for all schools so that the data was pulled on the same day. Again, don't forget to save those enrollment summary reports from Infinite Campus. If all the schools in the grade span are Title I schools, you may be able to move the next lowest poverty school to the comparison school section of the spreadsheet. Remember, up to 1/2 of the schools can be listed as comparison schools. Now, if the grade span includes both Title I and non-Title I schools, moving the next lowest poverty Title I school from the Title I school section to the comparison school section would not be an option because the comparison schools cannot be a mix of Title I and non-Title I schools. And the final option would be to do a salary comparison. You can see there's a salary comparison tab in the workbook. This is something that your KDE consultant can help you complete. Just contact us and we'll walk you through it. So our final comparison is for grade span B. For this grade span, we're comparing a Title I school, which is Jefferson Middle, to a non-Title I school, Garfield Middle. We'll enter Garfield's information into the comparison section. So Garfield Middle School has a grade span of 6 through 9, an enrollment of 600, and an FTE of 26. Our average student to staff ratio was 23.08, and our comparability ratio is 25.38. So moving to our Title I school section, we have Jefferson Middle School, whose grade span was 6 through 8. Enrollment was 500, and the FTE was 23. The student to staff ratio is 21.74, which is comparable to the comparability ratio of 25.38. The schools in grade span B are comparable, so we can move on. Once all of the schools are determined to be comparable, we're ready to review the comparability checklist and submit the report to KDE. The checklist is on the CR Checklist tab. The checklist is included in the workbook as well as linked on the Title I Part A Documents and Resources webpage. Once you submit the comparability report to KDE, your consultant will use this checklist to verify the accuracy of the report. You can also reference this checklist as a means to self-assess your comparability report prior to submitting it to KDE. You do not have to enter any data on this checklist. Your KDE consultant will complete this section. So the checklist is divided into 3 sections. CR Worksheet. This section applies to all districts as all districts must complete that page. The student to staff ratio section, which will apply to districts who had to document comparability between schools, which is the majority of Kentucky districts. And the salary ratio section. This section only applies to schools who were unable to determine comparability using student to staff ratios and therefore had to use the salary comparison option. When you're sure you've completed the comparability report correctly, be sure to save your work. Remember, the file name should be the school year, the district name, and the abbreviation CompRep. Once the file has been saved, please upload it to the GMAP District Document Library. When you've uploaded the report into GMAP, please email your KDE consultant and let them know that the file is ready to be reviewed. In your email, please verify that you used only state and locally funded staff in your FTE counts. Your consultant will review the report and notify you if it's approved or requires revision. When your report is approved, your consultant will upload the approved file into the GMAP District Document Library and send you the file via email, as well as remind you to save the enrollment summary reports used to complete the comparability report. Remember to submit your comparability report by the November deadline and that any questions may be directed to your KDE consultant. Thank you for watching the comparability report tutorial.